Hello, welcome back. My name is Yenja, and today we're going to talk about how to become a straight A student part 2. For those of you who don't know, I'm a memory champion who graduated from business school 2 years early thanks to memory techniques, but also some studying techniques. I know that a lot of you were interested in habits videos, and I definitely want to do a habits video as soon as I can, but I want to finish what we started and finish off setting the foundations to how to become a straight A student. First things first, I've opened a coffee, so you can buy me a coffee, or in my case, a bubble tea. If you like any of my videos, I don't make a lot of money on these videos, so if you want to support me, please send $3 at coffee.com/yenja, or however much you think that a bubble tea costs, or give a monthly subscription of just $1. That would help a lot. You can find this book by Cal Newport and other book recommendations in the description down below. Part 2, summary. Step 1, take smart notes. Now, I know a lot of you are watching this video and you're just kind of casually watching it, but I think when it comes to things that you're learning, you should really be taking notes. I take notes and sometimes I don't refer back to them, but I still think that just the effort of having to pay attention and then writing down those notes and then consolidating it with a physical pen and paper, in my case, actually helps retention. Always go to class and try to take the best notes possible. When I was studying in business school, I was also memory competitioning and traveling all over the world for that. So I was a little bit distracted, but whenever I was in Stockholm, I would try my best to attend every single class that I could. For non-technical courses, capture the big ideas by taking notes in the question, evidence, conclusion format. So let's say the question is, who was the best painter of the 21st century? Who is the best painter of the 21st century? And you might find lots of evidence saying David Cho is the best painter, he's the highest paid artist all time. And this is a non-technical question, so there isn't a simple true or false, but then you could also find evidence against why David Cho is the best painter of the 21st century, etc., until you reach a conclusion. Oftentimes, especially in college or university, for non-technical questions, it's more about being able to bring the conclusion with well-researched evidence and asking the right questions more than it is about giving the optimal answer. For technical courses, record as many sample problems and answers as possible. So there were a lot of things in my business school education that were just, this is the number you need to get to and you need to show the thought process behind it. I would just gather as many former exams and previous exams and quizzes and sample problems and look through each and every one of them almost until I had a natural instinct for what the answer would be. I would just kind of look at it and see why as well. Step 2, demote your assignments. Work a little bit each day on your assignments. Don't suffer from day before syndrome. Because I was doing so many things while I was at university, I would sometimes have day before tests. Honestly, sometimes I would have hour of the exam prep, which is not to recommend because I really regret only using memory techniques without getting a profound understanding for the subject matter in some of my economics classes. Because what happens when you do the thing day before is that you don't sleep on it. And when you don't sleep on information, it doesn't really register in the long term as well. You can binge watch a show in 12 hours in one day, and then like a month from then you might not remember much about the show, but if you watch and you talk about it and you reflect on it, sort of like how everybody did with Game of Thrones, if you do it for months at a time or weeks, then you have some time to process and reflect and let that information sink in. And in the same way, I think you should really try to play a marathon game if it's possible with the subject that you're learning instead of a sprint. Read only the favored sources on the syllabus in detail. I'm going to write this out on the screen because it's kind of complicated. Readings that make an argument are more important than readings that describe an event or person, which are more important than readings that only provide context. Work in groups on problem sets, solve problems on the go, and write up your answers formally the first time. I think working in groups is really helpful because when you're working by yourself, you might not know which things, which mental blocks or which concepts that you think you may have a good handle on, but you don't, and you're kind of solidifying that information when you're teaching your peers. And when you ask your peers questions, you might realize that there are questions to exams or the subject matter that you didn't even realize you had. And also, I just think it's good to be social. Step number 3, marshal your resources. Figure out exactly what the test will cover. Usually, I try to sit with as many tests from years of yore as possible to try to see a pattern. What happened at business school was I would download the previous maybe 10 exams on the specific exam I was about to take, and then see if there was a pattern in terms of what things were more trendy to ask 5 years ago and what things are more likely to show up on this exam. Also, if you do step 1, attend as many classes as you can, you're gonna kind of get hints about what the teacher or the professor is interested in getting as an answer, or which concepts that he or she or they actually thinks is important for you to know. So I always also try to do a little bit of a psychological profile on the professor, because then you know what they're going to find relevant enough to put into the next exam. And sometimes the psychological profile is, this professor is pretty lazy, so he's going to just recycle the questions that he had in the previous exams. Cluster your notes for non-technical courses. Yes, I would suggest doing a mind map for non-technical courses. Build mega problem sets for technical courses. Yes. Step number 4, conquer the material. Embrace the quiz and recall method. It's the single most efficient way to study. Basically, what happens is, after you've read something or after you've consumed some information that you're supposed to know really well, quiz yourself, do a recall, and also ask yourself if you really understood what's happening in the text, and ask yourself questions like, who was at the Battle of Stalingrad? It's so easy to read something off the page and just say, oh, obviously this is this because it's there. And then, but if you just close your eyes and try to do active recall, like, what did I just read? What did I just see? Then you're going to find that maybe there are some mental gaps. Spread out memorization over a couple of days or a longer period of time. Absolutely. When you cram, you can't memorize as much. In memorization, in memory competitions especially, we have this concept called chunking, and you put things into little chunks, little sizable chunks, so that it's easier for your brain to process. So for example, in 2017, if you've seen memory games at Jakarta, I tried to memorize 40 decks of cards in an hour. You might want to just read through 40 decks of cards and then read it again. By the time you get to the last deck, you're going to realize that there's so many gaps in the first 10 decks. And basically what you try to do instead is try to consolidate it so that it has a feeling of this information belongs to this period and this information belongs to this other period. So what you do is you divide those decks of cards into little chunks that you can then memorize better because it's divided and therefore easier for your brain to handle. And in the same way, when you're learning a memory system or you're learning any subject, if you spread it out over a couple of days, it is going to be easier to memorize because your brain can only do so much at the same time. Step number 5, invest in academic disaster insurance. This basically means that if there are things that you don't know about whatever it is that you're studying and you have questions about it, don't delay. Try to write down, oh, who was the best author of the 19th century? And then write it down in a margin and then collect all of these questions that you have and sit down and answer those questions as best you can. Because you don't want to show up at the exam or the quiz and realize that you actually had this question but you never got it answered. Step number 6, provide A+ answers. This is probably why I didn't get A's in a lot of my studying history. Look over the whole test first. Yes, you should do that. Figure out how much time you need for each part. So let's say you have an 90-minute exam. Try to make sure that you divide up the time as well as you can and then leave a little bit of a cushion. Always leave a little bit of a cushion so that you have 10 minutes to maybe go through your notes or look through, recheck your work and check your work. Answer the questions in order of increasing difficulty. I would say this depends on who you are as a person. Some people find it easier to answer the most difficult question first and then knowing that they have a lot of easy answers to go through later. But I think most people are in the latter category of people who like to answer the easiest questions first and then have some time to digest and think through how they're going to answer the more difficult questions. Write out a mini outline before you answer any essay questions. So I almost failed middle school because I didn't outline the essay that I was writing. I just had a great essay idea, and instead of outlining it and knowing the narrative arc and knowing like how to piece together everything that I was trying to say, I just started writing, which is a terrible idea, I think, especially in a pressed, time-constrained environment. But if you write a mini outline, and it doesn't have to be complicated, but just bullet points like, I'm going to hit this topic and this point and this point and then this evidence and answer this question and draw this conclusion at the end or in the middle or however best suits the answer, it will probably aid you because you know kind of where you're going with it. Use any and all leftover time to check and recheck your work. Exactly what I said earlier. So I hope this has been helpful. I think a lot of people are asking, how do I use memorization techniques? And at the end of the day, if you don't have a good study strategy and a study skill to accompany whatever memory techniques you might be using, it's not going to help you. You need the foundational ability and the habit of studying to even be able to incorporate memorization techniques. Comment of the week is by Lucas FC, who writes, even though this was a memory channel, I don't intend for it to always be a memory channel. I strongly recommend you don't memorize. In chemistry, there's a lot of logic. Try to understand why so, what makes it true. If you can memorize a formula but you don't know how to use it, it's just worthless. I was on a trip and I met a physicist who works at CERN, I think, and he gave me this really long formula and I could memorize it in a minute, but did I understand it? Am I getting job offers from CERN? Absolutely not, because if you don't understand what's happening, it's not going to help you. So that was comment of the week. So as I previously said, please support me by sending me a coffee or a bubble tea. Give me some money. Please sign up for my newsletter. All the information for the coffee, the book recommendations, and everything else is in the description down below. In the newsletter, I will be sending out a discount or some exciting news for certain things later in the fall that will help you guys with memory training. So hope you like and subscribe. Hope you have a good week. See you next week. Bye.